Joining me today is Arjan Bhullar, who fights Amir Aliakbari at 1FC 166. That fight is on Friday, March 1st. So, Arjan, I wanted to start here. You joined 1FC, kind of made that choice to walk away from the UFC, this new move for you. Obviously, you accomplished a lot of your goals. You got the chance to be a world champion. You had the notoriety and all that. But you've also kind of been limited in the amount of fights you got, right? Like only 3 fights over a 5 year span. I know some obstacles and injuries and stuff like that. Has it sort of been frustrating for you waiting to get, in there a little bit more often?
Absolutely, man. I'm a competitor. Coming from a wrestling background, used to competing all the time. That's what gets me going. Nothing more than that. Not the promotion aspect. I mean, yeah, money's important as well. You got to take care of your family at this point in your life, but it's the competition that gets me excited. And I see a lot of other fighters complaining about that as well. It is what it is, right? Like at one point, I was being scapegoated for not wanting fights or that type of thing. That's not the case. But I'm excited to get back in there. I'm excited to get back in there, within the same calendar year for a second fight. That's exciting. So I'm hoping it just sort of continues this way, to be quite honest with you. Um, but yeah, I'm excited to be active, and I'm excited to have this fight booked.
Cool. Awesome. And I wanted to ask you too, is that the ideal time frame for you? 2, 3 a year? You said you like competition. I know those wrestlers, they'll do 10 in a day if you let them. Are you more of I'll fight 5 or 6 times? Ideal world, what does it look like for you?
Hey man, I fought from when I come from the UFC, that contract and my new one, to have 3 fights a year. I have that language in my contract. For that reason, I want to be active, and those are the number of fights I've always wanted throughout all this. One, I earn more that way. Two, it keeps you sharp. If you don't, I train year round. This is what I do. What else are you training for? Or what's the motivation? Or that's when you get injured, right? You have to stay sharp. So since I've been an athlete with these guys, my language and my contract has said 3 a year, and I've held up my end of that commitment.
That's good to hear. Now, I'm curious too. A lot of fighters talk about time away, being sort of wasted time because you're not in camp. Some fighters have talked about that's when they feel like they get their biggest improvement. Do you feel like, having a goal and knowing what you're working for makes you better? Or do you prefer, sometimes being able to experiment in the gym is worth it?
Both. You can experiment, but also have a goal then, knowing that, hey, in 4 to 5 months, I'm going to have my next one, you know? Otherwise, you can only experiment for so long. You lose your edge to what your actual game is, and you just become an experimenter. You know what I mean? You got to go to war too.
Absolutely. Now, I want to talk about your past fight and your upcoming fight in a second. But before I do, I did want to ask you about, one of the best Canadian heavyweight prospects out there right now, because I see the name Jag Bhullar showing up more and more on people's radar. And I saw him in an article about, who the UFC should be in on signing from Canada recently. And I know that's your cousin, correct? I'm not mistaken on that. That's your cousin. So tell me what it's like to sort of have a guy, sort of working in your shadows where you were, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and sort of leading him that way.
That's how it's always been, man. We currently live together and have lived together our entire life. So although the relationship is cousin, I mean, we're as close as can be, right? And yeah, training partner my whole life as well. He had his aspirations as a wrestler. I had mine as well. Then I crossed over into the fight game, and he came right on over. He's been one of my best training partners my entire life. It's one thing that we always say is, we could have gotten far in athletics without each other, but definitely not as far together. We've helped each other get to the highest of highs. And yeah, it's good to see the success that he's having and has had. He trains hard, and I wish him nothing but the best.
That's awesome to hear. We look forward to seeing some big fights for him coming up. Now, I want to ask you too about this matchup with Aliakbari, because it's a unique one in that sometimes you see a high level wrestler in MMA. Typically, you do not see two high level wrestlers up against each other in a fight like this. You both qualified for the Olympics, granted, one in folk style, one in Greco Roman. But what is your thoughts on having maybe the highest level wrestling MMA fight, perhaps in history?
Sure. And there's an asterisk there. I actually competed in the games that he wasn't
That's
able
true.
to. And I'm proud of that, of what I am and how I've gone about my life and my character. So that's number one. But yeah, it's exciting to be a part of that. But I will say this, we've both accomplished great things in wrestling, but we've been in MMA so long. I think we have more than just that in terms of skill sets. And MMA is different from just a straight wrestling match, you know. And that's what I'm excited for. There's so many different variables and ways to win. That's why it makes it for such an exciting sport. And I think that's what you're really going to see here. Rather than us taking a wrestling mat, we're jumping in a cage, and we're going to put on a full display of martial arts abilities.
Yeah, and so often we see those double wrestlers turn into a boxing match because they just can't, right? But I also did want to ask you about this too, because again, not trying to harp on the wrestling too much here, but you come from different styles of wrestling backgrounds. Not that both
Sure.
of you probably haven't dabbled in the other, and now MMA has kind of helped you blend together. But what would you say if you were trying to explain it to a layman out here about the difference in the ways that you go about wrestling versus the ways he does now that you've blended him into MMA?
Yeah, it's funny when as a wrestler you have a chip on your shoulder, as a freestyler against the Greco guys, and a little bit vice versa, which style's better and that type of thing, more effective as a wrestler even, and who's a better wrestler overall because of that. I just prefer freestyle more because you're not limited. You can do the Greco attacks as well as attack the legs. And folk style on top of that, you're able to ride guys and all that type of thing. So, um, you know, he's done great things, like I said. It's exciting for the sport of wrestling. Obviously, Iran's had phenomenal wrestlers. They've got a long tradition of history and success in the sport. He comes from that lineage. If you see his MMA style, he's been more effective with taking people down from their legs, from the freestyle component. So, and I'm sure, like you said, he's dabbled in that, and I know they do in Iran as they come up in their system. So that shows. But again, I feel I'm the better wrestler, and especially suited to MMA. And I'm just a better athlete.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing it. Now, before I get the final thoughts on that fight, I do have to ask you about the future and where we go from here, because your only loss on your record is to Anatoly Malkin, who is fighting as the main event on this same exact card, right? Obviously, he's fighting for a very different title, one that I question whether or not he can even make weight for, but one that he's going to be fighting for on this card. How important is that rematch to you? Is putting a stamp here on Aliakbari and asking for another shot at getting that done?
I don't ask for anything. I earn it. Number one, I won't be asking after this fight. I'm not intending on asking anything now. And to be quite honest, I'm not going to entertain that at this point. Akbari is the one that stands in front of me. I'd love to answer those questions after this fight, but right now it's Akbari, and that's where my sniper rifle is trained.
Well, there's my final question for you then. How do we get it done against Aliakbari on March 1st? How's this one end?
Hey, I'm excited. You know what? He came up through AK Thailand. I was out in California. I always knew about him. And I knew we were going to see each other. I knew that for a fact, and I'm sure he knew that as well. And here it is, and in Doha, Qatar, of all things, a huge event. Thank you to the Qatari government for bringing us in there, and I'm excited. Geographically, it makes a lot of sense with Iran there. We got over 700,000 out of 2.5 million people in Doha that are Indians. So we're gonna have a big Indian contingent there. I'm excited to get it on March 1st. Everybody tune in, come on live, queue tickets. That's where it's at. You grab your tickets for the live event or tune in globally. I'm excited to get it on, man. I'm excited. I've sacrificed. I've had a great camp, and we've made the necessary adjustments to get this one done.
All right, what you're hearing here first, folks, has been Arjan Bhullar, who fights Amir Aliakbari at 1FC 166. That fight, once again, Friday, March 1st. Arjan, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you.